Neither am I. So,
All right, guys, we're on live right now. The counter's going. We hoping to get some folks on here, and so what we'll do here is wait a little while until wait a little bit rather until we have some folks come on, and we're going to get started. So we'll give a couple minutes.
okay, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Have my green juice
That's it.
so I can juice up for this incredible conversation. Mm. Yeah, this chat setup is really great too.
It is, man. It really is. I like the way this tool works. So the good thing is about it, folks that are not able to catch it live, they can catch it later on because it automatically push to Facebook, push to YouTube, and Twitter. So that's the beauty in that.
Great.
Yeah. So if they
Yeah,
can't,
I'll be grabbing this and also just reposting it on my.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I have an app that converts YouTube videos to IG that can then just go right on my actual page.
Oh, you talked to me about that. You did say that.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that. All right. Thank you for the reminder. Myles is reminding us, let us know. I didn't even know we chat as boys right now that we are still live. Everything's being recorded, so I want to make sure.
Right.
Like I say, we'll give another minute here when we start up on up. So thank you guys that are already joining us. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate you guys coming in, checking us out. We're going to start here about another 45 seconds and go from there. Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool tool, man. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna move this bag out of the back of me. Oh, I can't really turn me off, can I? I thought about that. I should have. Let me see if I can turn me off somehow. Well, I actually leave it alone. Producer on the back end, working things out. I didn't know how to do that. She just worked that out. I'm gonna learn that tool right there. Well, family, let's go on and get started. Guess we're gonna kill the music in the background here in a moment and go from there. Well, family, hey, welcome on in. We have a wonderful conversation with my guest today, which is Mr. Artie Gonzales. Artie's one of my brothers I happen to work with when we train officers. We train officers all over this nation. Artie came in as one of the newest members within the group. I mean, his story is awesome. He's going to go over a little bit of it today. But some of the questions that we're going to talk about today is just, the transformation of his life and some of the things that he would have young adults and have us know, with some of the things that he went through and how he changed his life. So I won't speak too much on that because I know that's part of his story. For you guys that's joining in, most of us definitely know me from the church side of things, but I want to start having these conversations with folks within the church, outside the church, and just, from different backgrounds, from different cultures, because I want to get a better understanding, or we want to get a better understanding of how people tick, how people work, some of the things that that has blessed their lives, some of the things that have harmed their lives. So, man, as we getting ready to get started, thank you once again. Thank you guys for joining, and let's go on and pick up here with Brother Artie. Well, Artie, welcome on in, so to speak. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
With me. And just start, give us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Okay, so just to give you the short of it, my name is Artie Gonzales, and I was a juvenile who at the age of 16 was convicted of a crime. I was tried as an adult in the mid-90s, and I was sentenced to 19 to life in prison, and sent at 18 years old, I was sent into the adult institutions. I served a total of 21 years on that life sentence, 8 of which I served in solitary confinement in a supermax facility called Pelican Bay State Prison. I was a very troubled teenager and youth, and I came from a background of very acute abuse and neglect, and loss. I basically lost like the one person that was my guiding light when I was 13 years old. This was the person who inspired me to be my best self. And when she died, this is my grandmother. I basically self destructed and I went down a very destructive path. I went right into the gang lifestyle, all the way into my crime. And then when I hit the adult institution at 18 years old, I just started to get worse and deepen into it. And slowly but surely got deeper into the organized crime situation that exists inside of prisons. Um, at the age of about 23 or so, I was removed from the general population and sent to solitary confinement because at that time I was a high level member of organized crime and they removed me for the safety and security of other people who were incarcerated. That's why I was there for the next 8 years. In 2010, I had a spiritual experience while in solitary confinement. This led to a really great awakening consciously for myself. I understood that I was not supposed to be there and I was supposed to be doing other purposeful, positive work in my life.
That's awesome.
And I did not ignore it. I did not ignore what happened to me. I made the choice that day to walk away from the only life I had known for many years and started to do deep transformational inner work. And in 2015, after being granted parole by the parole board, my change had been so fundamental that they granted me parole and I came home in 2015. I've been home for 8 years now, and I am a film industry professional. I work in television and features as a location manager and scout, and I also produce my own content. I'm an author, speaker, many, many, many hats, but ultimately, I am a person for the people and especially for the youth.
Amen.
And so that's why I'm here today. And that's a bit about my story.
I appreciate you starting like that, man. If I go into the story just a little bit, tell me a little bit about your thought process, kind of around the time when your grandmother passed away, because you said before were you kind of on that straight and narrow path, or was it more so you kind of leaning a certain direction? Then when grandma passed away, or was taken away out of your life, what really happened there?
Sure. So, like many teenagers and young people who are growing up in environments that are violence based, or not necessarily, they're underserved communities, people on the poverty line, things of that nature. I came from a similar neighborhood. And in spite of everything that I was going through with the abuse and the neglect and my environment, in spite of all those things, I actually was still on a positive trajectory because of my relationship with my grandmother. And she was a positive influence in my life who nurtured my potential and my promise. And for her, I was maintaining my grades. So I was still getting really great grades in school. And I was very proficient in mathematics, always very smart with mathematics. So by 13 years old, I was already pretty much all the way through algebra and on my way to geometry, and was on a very positive trajectory. So my thought process back then was, I don't like what's happening to me at home and in my environment, but at least I have this person.
Right now, did you live with grandma, or grandma was just some part of your life, so to speak?
Sure. She essentially raised my brother and I in our childhood because we had a single mother. Our mother was 16 years old when she had me. My father was not in the picture. So my mother was in her 20s when I was just a kid and was still living her life like someone who's in their 20s, and also had her own issues with abuse and neglect, substance abuse, things of that nature. So she was semi present. And for that reason, my grandmother was our primary caretaker.
Do you believe, just taking what you just talked about, do you believe that lack of male role model? You already know I work with men a lot, and so
Yeah.
I deal with men all across this nation. Do you believe that lack of having a male role model in your life, did you experience it from the back where you are missing a male role model, or missing my dad, where I fell short in some areas because of that? What do you think about that?
I feel like my grandmother did her best to play both roles
Okay.
in my life. And I don't think it's too much for me to say that no one could do that 100% to play both roles. Like
Right.
if it was just me with my daughter and I was trying to tap into my feminine and give her a motherly experience, it would be difficult for me to do that 100%, no matter how hard I try. Right?
You know,
So
that
much
is,
I could give her.
bro, let me touch on that because that's such a true statement. I'm happy you actually brought it up. I'm happy you brought it up because we have this concept, even, something we have a lot of single mother households and things of that nature. It's something, these single mothers have to do the job that the male should be doing. But even at best, they can only give you a feminine version of manhood because there's no way for them to give you a male version of what manhood is. They don't have that to give.
Sure.
So I hear exactly what you're saying, but it's the concept or the thought process is really good because even at their best, they can still only give you what they have, and so that's a good way of putting that out there. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And with the best of intentions, right?
Right.
And so I suppose at this time, I mean, I grew up having a tremendous amount of holding resentment toward my father. So my relationship with my father was not the best until many years later when I was a grown up. But initially, I held a lot of resentment towards my father, and I had no male role models in that sense.
Now,
So
real quick, how much older was your father than your mother when you said your mother was 16?
they were both 16.
Okay, now this is a good point because we look at that, we really kids having kids. I don't know another way to say it.
Yes.
I had my first son when I was 20 years old, and I can tell you right now, I was not ready. And I could tell that's an understatement, right? I could look, I could talk to my wife. I'm blessed enough to be with the same woman, and still, we were not quite ready. We were kind of thrown into this ring. Now I couldn't imagine being 16. I was 20 at the time, and it was difficult. So I can only imagine for two 16-year-olds still trying to live their life with they seeing things through the perspective of a teenager. But at the same time, like I say, you and your brother are here, you're born, you need a certain leadership in your life, and they just probably don't have that to give at that time. But it doesn't stop us from having those regrets it didn't stop you from having those regrets, and it's something because this portion of the story, is like lots of people that I've talked to about certain things and certain conditions in their life, where they were missing certain things because the parents that they were born into, they didn't have that to give. And it's such a real aspect because it has caused some traumatic situations, in a lot of their lives. So hearing you just talk about it is, also just a reminder how difficult it is for, teenage parents and things of that nature. Very true.
There's something to be said about two kids at that age having kids. They are not even fully solidified in their own identity yet. They don't even know who they are yet. They haven't had wealth of world experience. They don't have financially, they're not in place. Mentally, they're not in place, and perhaps spiritually, they're not even aligned to come into parenthood with all that would entail. Right. So
Correct.
there's something to be said about that. And then in addition to that, um, it's also the fact that because my father was absent, that actually opened me up later to being very vulnerable to another male experience, like a more sinister male experience, because I did not have an actual experience with what true masculinity looks like. It was not role modeled for me. So later on, when I had lost my grandmother, I was really, really, really vulnerable to other types of men saying, "Hey, come with us. We'll show you how men behave and how they act and how you're supposed to be." Right.
Wow. Well, that's a big deal, right? Because when we think about it, attention is attention. And we hate to say it that way, but it's a very real thing. I mean, we got to be honest, right? You always, how I teach you. I say, shoot straight from the hip. I don't try to, sugarcoat it for nobody.
Yeah.
We have to remember this as parents and leaders and as people, that attention is attention, especially when it comes to young kids and young adults. Whether that attention is positive or whether it's negative. Like you said, when your grandmother's passed away and that attention was gone. Now you're looking for somebody just that, wants to have that connection with you, even though it was, negative attention is still attention, and that's something to be said for that. It's very true.
Yeah. And when you lose someone at 13, and then that was the only positive person that you had in your life up to that point, at 13 years old, you are really going to ask yourself two questions. Who am I?
Right.
Now that this has happened, who am I? And how popular am I? Popular, because it really, what I'm trying to say is, what is my identity and what is my level of pure acceptance? Because pure acceptance is sort of like it is extremely crucial to the identity of a teenager to feel like they are accepted by their peers. But if I have not had that positively role modeled for me where I come from, then somebody else is going to feel that hole, that gap, and they're going
That's
to
right.
say, "We're willing to accept you, but at a cost." And that is exactly the path I went down myself.
Mm, very real. Now, not talking too much on what actually took place, but knowing that you go into a place where you commit this crime and you have this man 21. How many years? 21 total.
21 years, yeah.
21 years, man. 21 years total. You have this experience. Tell me more about when you first went in, your thought process. Because you went in with 16 years old.
Yeah.
Going in 16 years old, and take me to a place where your mindset started to change, or your thoughts started to change.
You mean into the negative, lost in the wilderness?
Whatever portion you want to take me to, because I can only imagine. I want to imagine here, because this is you going through this experience. I've never been in prison. I've never committed a crime where it's where it's put me behind bars. And I'm saying that because I can't even imagine what's going through your mind.
Yeah.
When a judge, or you're being sentenced, to a life sentence. What was that thought process?
I have to say, man, like I do not remember having a positive thought process or a positive inner dialogue with myself from 16 years old until I was 32 years old was the first time I ever thought anything positive,
Really?
pro-social. Yes, 32 years old. And I know it was 32 years old because that was in 2010 when I had this experience. Up until that point, including 16 years old and entering the justice system at that age, I was expected to be there. I actually thought
Mm.
this is where I'm supposed to be. This is my value. This is all I'm worth. I am supposed to be entering these institutions and getting deeper into organized crime because this is my destiny. This is my fate. Some people are born with a silver spoon, and other people like myself, we're born with that stick, as the young people would say these days, right? So I was kind of like in mentally in the thought process in my mind is I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing anyway. This is my trajectory now. Any dreams or hopes I had prior to my grandmother's death are gone. So there was no positive thinking. There was only stinking thinking for the next 16 years of my life.
Wow. I'm gonna tell you something that most people probably don't even know about me unless you knew me in my younger portion of my life. I was always an athlete, man. Ball player for sure, man. But I had gone through some experiences myself coming up, and man, what what bothered me, or what happened to me, rather, by the time I was 18, I literally thought I would die. And of
Mm.
course, we haven't talked long enough for me to share that with you. But when you're saying these things right here, I never thought about prison, or necessarily being in gangs, things of that nature. But it literally would quick, because of things that were going on around me. I wasn't sure that I was going to live. And that sounds so odd. I mean, imagine this kid already knows he's getting ready to go to school on scholarship because I had earned a football scholarship. But I literally thought I would never live to make it to go to Arizona. So when
Mm.
literally that, I remember my last summer, the summer I was supposed to leave, I almost wouldn't go out the house. I used to actually even work out early in the morning because I figured at that time, none of these knuckleheads that's out there in the streets going to try to get me. And I wasn't even the problem. My older brother at the time was heavily into gangs and doing a lot of the wrong things. And a lot of people, looking for him, be looking at me. And of course, I wasn't involved in that life. But at that time, way back in the early 90s, that never stopped people from, going after people's families, things of that nature. So
Yeah.
in the back of my mind, I was always paranoid and scared because of that. And I hate to say it that way, but I literally was. So I would literally go work out, do my workouts in the morning. I wouldn't even go out in the afternoon. I would stay home and in the evening, make sure I went out at night. It was just, man, it really, really bothered me. And so that's something that you said, I saw my life like, being locked up in prison. Like that's just what I thought it was, what I thought it was going to be. Actually, I didn't even see my life going past me, being 18 years old, because
Yeah.
I couldn't really see myself, making it out. And I thought to myself, wow, it's kind of crazy when you look at it that way. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I can only imagine, you looking at it right now, or looking back, hindsight being 2020, you know, it's odd, isn't it?
I look back at that period of my life like some kind of horrible movie. I can't believe it happened to me. Sometimes
Mm,
I'm so far removed from that nowadays, but I look back at that time in my life, and I also have to have compassion for myself in a sense of understanding that that's just what was role modeled where I was from. The expectation was that most of us were going to go to prison because that's where our uncles went, that's where our cousins went, that's where, and we looked up to these people. These were people that were like legends in the neighborhood. They were heroes, and they all did time, and they came home and they had these war stories. So in our young minds, remember, we've given away, because we don't have our fathers, so we've given away what the idea of masculinity looks like. We've put that in the hands of others. This is something like we're young warriors, and
yeah,
these warriors are coming back and they're sharing tales with us, and we're just fantasizing about being warriors ourselves. So in some sense, I have to have some respect, some compassion for that experience, because we are shaped by our environment. What I try to tell the youth these days, though, is that if you can get to a point where you can understand that yes, these things are happening to you, but there still is choice, there still is some level of choice in that predicament. That makes all the difference in the world, and I wish I would have known that when I was 16, 17, 18. I just, it was never even said to me in those words at all. No one ever even gave me a sense of hope. No one ever stopped me and said, hey, there's another way, you have another choice. Not a single conversation, not where I was from.
yeah. I actually understand that, man. I was like, say, I'm a neighborhood raised kid myself, and I'm blessed to have a good mother and father. I had to be very honest with that, and that really, kept me out of things. That don't mean nothing ever took place. Like I said, I had a lot of things that took place within the household and things growing up. But at the same time, blessed enough to know what's good and what's real. Because one thing I did as a child was I paid attention, like, to things that happened to people, and I happen to live in an area, a lot of gang shootings, a lot of gang deaths. And so it in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to die that way. I don't want to, be
Yep.
part of the prison system or be all locked up. 'Cause I got, I can tell you something right now that will blow your mind. My two really good friends as kids, when I say my really good friends, we go to school together, elementary, growing up. Those guys are both dead.
Mm.
They're both dead. One died when we were in my 20s, and one died when he was in his late 30s. And I think about that, the time I got into high school, and of course, my boys, I still know them, and still love them when I got in high school. But I knew my path had to be different because I knew I wanted to do my best to live. I had seen my brother had already gotten enough trouble for the both of us. I didn't need that any longer, and so it's something how we take certain things on and how we value certain things, because that dude that was hard in the hood, probably did a little
Yeah.
time. That dude, he did this right, and he had so much respect. Okay, in the area that in which we lived, that was kind of like that was the OG, so to speak, right? And so I look back at those things, then I say somehow we value certain things. How we can look at somebody that worked their whole life, like my father, worked his entire life, and how I could take my eyes off my dad who worked his whole life, and I can look at something and I value that because I see people respect, or it felt like people respected the OG more than they respected a hardworking man.
Yeah.
I was blessed enough early on to understand what was good and what was bad. So man, thank you for sharing that. Now, a question came in. It was actually the next question I was going to ask you, but let's go
Huh.
ahead and bring it in. It came in from Maisha, Pastor Maisha. What caused you to start having positive thoughts?
What caused me to start having positive thoughts?
Yes,
So
or change
I
your
would
way.
say, yeah, yeah. So here's the interesting thing is that no matter how you're raised, and no matter how deep I mean, you have to picture I'm sitting in solitary confinement for 8 years. Like I'm basically buried under the prison because the institution has deemed that I'm a threat to other gang members on the general population yard, other killers, people they would deem to be killers, right?
I don't
I
mean to
can't
laugh,
even be
bro, but
around
that's
them.
that's real. That's real.
That's like some Hannibal Lecter stuff, right? And
Yeah.
they got me buried in this tomb. So having positive thoughts in that scenario seems impossible. But the thing is that no matter where you come from, when you're 16 years old, 18 years old, eventually you're going to hit your mid 20s, you're going to hit your late 20s. And no matter what, your maturity process is going to happen with or without your permission.
Mm.
And so what happened to me was I started to mature, my thoughts started to mature, and I started to see some of the hypocrisy and some of the inconsistencies with what these other men who had taken over for my father, basically, what they had taught me based on what I was seeing. And so I started to question the lifestyle. Like, well, you've taught us A, but we practice B in real life.
Mm.
So that's not adding up. And I was not receiving satisfactory answers when I was asking questions about this lifestyle. And I was starting to grow resentful and I was starting to become dissatisfied with it. So this was naturally happening within me. When I had this spiritual experience in my cell that day, all it did was reaffirm for myself that I was on the right path, the way that I was maturing, the way that my thoughts were starting to improve in that sense, because I was starting to feel like, I come from a gang where our main enemies look just like me, but it's just a north-south thing. Northern California, Southern California, and that's why we're enemies, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And that makes sense until you have this maturity and you really start to look at it and you're like, but I don't want to fight these people. Like, I'm getting to know these people where I am, and they have similar family values, they have similar culture, I'm getting to know about their kids and their wives and all these things. And it's like, if this door opens right now, I don't want to fight with this person. Like, I don't really have anything against them. And I think it's ridiculous that because somebody drew an invisible line across the state of California on a map one day, I have to now like hurt this person. It just didn't make sense to me anymore, right? So the positive thinking I was starting to have was actually more a questioning of the negative. And I didn't realize at the time that it was just my mind was starting to trend up into a positive. It was questioning the negative. Why are we acting the way we are? Why do we function the way that we do? Why do we believe what we believe? And so when this experience happened to me, all it did was reaffirm, like, oh man, I'm onto something here. And whatever's speaking to me right now is telling me, get on this path. And it was the first time that I really looked at myself and I was like, oh my God, I have value. I have positive intrinsic value, and I'm actually supposed to be touching the world in a positive way.
Amen.
Right? Like that was
Yeah.
one of the very first positive thoughts I had at 32 years old, man. And as I always say, when you know a thing, you can't unknow it.
Right.
So I had no excuses once I knew that about myself. If I know that I have value, that I matter on some level, how can I ignore that and abuse myself? I can't. So I couldn't ignore it. And that's how I started to have more positive thinking and thoughts about myself
Good.
and the world.
Well, that's a good way to thank you for sharing that. You know, I found out in having these conversations with folks, especially within myself, because I found when I was younger, I blamed so much on other people. Well, I didn't, I wasn't raised this way. I didn't come from this. I didn't have this advantage. This happened to me, and it was more so from the things that happened to me in my own life, and I took them and I internalized them, and what I allowed it to do was make me worse. I've got this concept, or I wrote this concept, and I also have. I don't even think I shared my book with you already. Now I think about it. I'm also, yeah, bro. I also, yeah, I never thought about that. Man, we be moving and shaking when we be working, so I don't think I've ever shared that. But I wrote a book actually called Wounded Soul, and in the book I talk about how certain things happen to us in life, and because we have this transformation process, we all go through a transformation process, but certain things transform us, for good things. And the other side of it is a certain things mutate us because we allow the transformation to be negative. See, but transformation still takes place both ways, right? Good
Yes.
and bad. And so what I've done is I've taken the thought process, especially of the bad things, when things happen to us, we can allow it to mutate us or transform us, because transformation is supposed to be a good thing, but mutation is always viewed negatively, right? Because something's went wrong. And most times people allow, negative things to mutate them. And me going back and looking through this, I was probably about my early 20s when I realized, I can't allow this stuff to, these my feelings and emotions about what took place lead my life. If I keep allowing these things to lead me down this road, down this path, I'm going to be less of a man than I'm supposed to be. As a matter of fact, I got to a place in my life where is it, do I even want to live? Is it the life that, I'm supposed to be living. I didn't even know God at the time, early in my 20s, and so I didn't know, about any of that portion of it. But just, is this the way it's supposed to be? When you say you were questioning, why this, why that, I think that's part of the reason we start looking at things differently, because we realize some of these answers are stupid. Some of these reasons we do things are absolutely stupid. I don't have another way to say it. So it's good. Can we look back and say, man, why didn't I get this earlier?
Yeah.
I could have I could have stopped myself from going through so much pain and so much hurt. The reason we when we figure things out, we start thinking differently. We think differently because we want our outcomes to be different, correct?
Yeah.
That's part of it, and so as we start taking these things on, and we realize our life didn't have to be the way it is, or we can still change our life from what it is right now to, hopefully the future different. It all starts with, a change in our thoughts and beliefs. We follow that up with continual actions. We can definitely have different outcomes.
For sure. And, I'll just say this real quick, because you inspire me to say this. I know we don't have time to really get into like growth mindset, the things that we talk about nowadays, but I want to say that with growth mindset, you think in your mind, like there are no losses, there are only lessons.
Right.
When you understand that, then no matter how much negativity occurred in my early childhood, while I was in prison, I can't tell you why it happened, why I was chosen to go through that experience. I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that I learned many lessons along the way, and those lessons now feed my purpose.
Amen.
And they now nurture and touch a lot of lives. So I don't want to question why that happened to me, or be resentful about it or angry. That time is gone.
Right.
But man, I learned so much, and these lessons have shaped me. And so when I can just transmute, for example, that perspective around my experiences, then it reshapes and the entire mindset. That actually is what I feel contributes to a growth mindset versus like, mindset that's not.
Well, maybe when we get a chance, man, we may have to do another one and talk about that growth mindset. I know we talk about it a little bit when we're doing our training, but that may be a great one to pick up on. I think, just listening to this portion of your story, we got this concept within Christianity about renewing your mind. And renewing your mind is really the concept of, renewing your thought process, and not just renewing it with anything, but renewing it, like from a Christian standpoint, it'd be like with the word of God, with the mindset of God, and really it's those thoughts, those things that lead us into a healthy place, a place where we can, I hate to say the word normal because I know everybody's normal is different. So I'm gonna say normal from a healthy standpoint, right? When we're the best version of ourselves, and where we can be, carry out the purpose that God has given us. So that's one thing I know you're big on purpose, and you're big on the now. What's behind me is behind me, but moving forward, this is where I'm at now, and how do I proceed, into the future from a positive standpoint. I wanted to ask you this last thing. I know this time has actually flown by, man. I didn't, man, we probably should have scheduled a longer time, but I also know you have to somewhere to go to. But I want this one question I wrote down for you. You said, if you only had one time to talk to a young adult right now, just this one moment you had, with this one moment in this lifetime to speak to that young adult, what would you say to him or her in this moment? What would be the last thing that you give them?
At your age, you may feel like you're an individual, that you are simply yourself, for example, right? A lot of us come from neighborhoods where we say, we in these streets, right? We're from the streets, or we for the streets, for example. But we are for the people. I would want someone young to understand that they are a global citizen, not just someone who's from, a couple of streets that come together like this and form a corner and a block. This is not who you are. You are a global citizen, and you are meant to touch many, 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 many lives in a very positive way. That's why you're actually here. You're here to find your purpose, and you're here to live in it. And so if I was to talk to a young person, it would be that, like, start to really think about what your responsibility is towards your community and towards society at large. And I think if someone can start asking themselves those kind of questions at a young age, I think when they start to mature and they start to actually come into themselves, because remember, they're trying to find their identity. They're still trying to solidify at 16, 17, 18 years old. Who am I? What's my value? But if I start to feed into that with, well, am I a global citizen? Like, do I actually have a responsibility to the world? Like the actual greater world around me and the people in my community? Is that a part of my identity? Because if it is, then I can't just limit myself to gang member,
Mm,
drug addict, killer, hustler, drug dealer, whatever name that you want to put on yourself. I can't just limit myself to that because I'm starting to ask myself questions like this, and it's just feeding into my maturity as I grow, right? So I would try to plant the seed. If I could talk to somebody young at this point in time, I would just plant the seed. And then the other thing that I really like to tell the youth, because I was 16 years old when I committed a life sentence crime, like a very serious crime, right? At 16 years old, I always tell them the same thing. It is that, sorry, just kind of makes me emotional a little bit. It's not our fault the way that we were raised or the things that are happening to us. We didn't choose this. You didn't do anything to deserve it. It says nothing about your value or who you are as a human being. You have to remember this happened to you, not because of you. This is something that has happened to you. And I also feel like we just kind of take anything that our parents or our neighborhood, older people in our neighborhood, things that they tell us, we just kind of take it as a truth and we accept it as a truth. And we never actually question where they learned it, who taught them that. So a young person is not necessarily like striving to find their own reasons why. They're not trying to find their own purpose or their own reason for living. They're just like taking on somebody else's explanation for why they're there and who they are without question, because that's how they were taught. And so I would just instill in a young person, plant a seed, start asking why. Where does it come from? Start asking who you really are and what your place is in this world. And I know those are big questions for a teenager. I get it. But I really wish I would have been asking myself that after my grandmother died,
mm.
because maybe I wouldn't have gone through the things that I went through, you know? So it's kind of where I stand on that.
Well, man, we really appreciate that, man. We appreciate your time because that you brought up some very good points. Believe it or not, we are very close to thinking in our thinking in certain areas, especially when it things like that. That's actually one of the things that's also within the book is that we have no choice. The parents we were born to. That's I'll always say it's God's choice. It's a
Yeah.
reason. It's that we were placed there. It's a reason we were placed with the parents that we were given to, and at the same time, we're supposed to come out victorious in this. And the
Yeah.
way we do come out victorious is living out our purpose, finding out what that purpose is and living it out. I definitely believe that with all of my heart, with all of my heart. Sometimes we have to go through the muck or through the hardships or through our failures. But at the same time, those things are the very things that develop us. They make us stronger. You know, um, I am the person I am because of all the things that I went through, the difficult things. I would love to say, it's the easy things that has developed this, but the truth of the matter is the hard things, the things that develop us, the things that we have to go through that test us, that make us cry, tear up, so to speak. So, I appreciate you today, just being candid and being honest, brother. I thank you so much once again for coming on. Um, before I sign off, you any words here we want to give to the crew or
One last thing to any teenagers or kids that are watching this right now, and you're glorifying the violence or you're growing up in it and you're looking up to these warriors I was talking about earlier. I just want you to know I've been to the other side of the rainbow. I've been to the end of it, and there ain't no pot of gold there. It's
Mhm.
not waiting for you. It really
Wow.
isn't. And what you are going to find is you're going to find a lot of very hurt children in men's bodies. That's what you're going to find. And they also didn't deserve what happened to them either. But there's no pot of gold. It is a complete waste of time to go down this path. And I went all the way to the end of it so you don't have to. You can change today. You can make the decision now. And when you're my age, you could have an empire that you get to keep at the end of the day. It doesn't get taken away from you. So love yourself. I got enough love for you until you can love yourself. But I'm
Amen.
just letting you know, like everything is love. That is at the end of the day, this whole entire thing. And we talked about Jesus Christ the other day, right? Like the
Yeah.
message of Christ. The entire message was love is the way. It is the path. So whatever that means to you, just please embrace it. I'm very glad to be here. Anyone who wants to get in touch with me, you can DM me on Instagram at the Artie Gonzales. I do respond to DMs. I do love to work with different organizations, youth, things of that nature. You can also go to my website, artiegonzales.com, and you can reach me there. Or you can just hit up Charles and be like, "Hey, how do
Right.
I get in touch?" So
That's
uh, really,
we see each other all the time
I'm
now.
grateful to be here. Really grateful, and I hope that something that we said today just inspires someone to to really just get on that growth mindset and on that path. Like if I can do it, trust me, you can do it.
Amen. Amen. So, Artie, we got your website up here, man. It's artiegonzales.com. Find my brother's book, man. I know it's an awesome book, man. I got to actually get it and read through it too, because I know we talked about, man. So I'm not gonna be pumping it up and not read it myself. So I'm gonna go through it. I should ask my wife. She probably already read everything. She reads everything. I mean, my wife, to the point, man, where she if she put in the library of stuff that she's read, she probably would take up a whole 10 by 10 wall with all the books she's read in her life. But man, thank you once again. Thank you for joining me, brother. I appreciate you. You have a blessed one. Take care, families watching us online. Thank you guys for checking us out. Continue watching the show that we're putting out right now. Thank you so much, family. Everybody take care. Have a blessed one. Bye now.
Bye.